per reports, the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in adding running back Nick Chubb to the team this offseason. So, for the first time in his career, running back Nick Chubb is set to become a free agent, being able to sign with any team that he wants. And also, looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they really have no running back under contract right now. They have Jalen Warren set to become a free agent, and they have Najee Harris as well, set to become a free agent. Although it is kind of interesting to see if Najee Harris re-signs with a team, it's unlikely. In other words, you look at Jalen Warren, and he is set to probably come back on a tender contract, but that leaves a window open for the Pittsburgh Steelers to sign another running back during the free agency period, or maybe draft one. And per reports of a Steelers reporter and Jeff Hathorn, Nick Chubb is on the radar for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He said this. Here's his quote about the Steelers potentially adding Nick Chubb this offseason. I'll throw out a name of someone I know that they're interested in, and at least talking to. The medicals would have to play out, and obviously it would be a decision, but Nick Chubb is someone they would consider. We're talking about probably a 1-year deal, a prove-it deal, an opportunity to get back on your feet, but there is interest. End quote. So it is important to note that the Pittsburgh Steelers cannot start legally talking to Nick Chubb yet, as the legal tampering period does not open until March 10th, just a couple days before the start of the new year. But this isn't the first time there's been talk of Nick Chubb and the rumor of him potentially joining the Pittsburgh Steelers, because there has been kind of some rumors in the past about this. But looking at Nick Chubb just in terms of his value right now, he's coming off of a gruesome knee injury. He did get back to the field and return and play in like 8 games, but he's coming off an ACL tear, MCL tear. If you remember, Minkah Fitzpatrick is actually the one who tackled him, hit his knee, and where he tore all those ligaments, it looked really bad. We didn't know if he was going to be able to return, but he did return. He did make a comeback, and he's still just getting rolling. He still needs to find his rhythm, and the first year after a major injury is not usually great. So the second year, expect him to get back to being himself. So last season, when looking at his contract in Nick Chubb, he had a base salary of just $1.125 million, but a signing bonus and other incentives that hit a cap total of $6.2 million. So that is much lower than what the Pittsburgh Steelers declined in Najee Harris's 5th-year option for. If you remember, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they didn't want to sign Najee Harris to that 5th-year contract worth like almost $10 million because they didn't believe in signing him to that much. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are obviously not going to sign him to a long-term contract under that same amount. So they're going to look for a cheaper option. And if Najee Harris isn't willing to come back at a cheaper option, more than likely he will be gone. And he will not be the Steelers running back next season, leaving the open door for another running back to sign with the Steelers. Other than Jalen Warren, obviously, because his 10-year contract I think will be around like $3 million. So he will more than likely come back. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are open to maybe sign Nick Chubb. And he's going to have to play on a prove-it contract, because he did not play great. He did not come back and show the explosiveness the same way that he had before his injury. So teams are going to be kind of wary and not maybe take the risk on him and want him back on a lower contract. So maybe his contract will be the same around what it was this past season, $6 million, or maybe even lower, maybe even on a lower contract as a prove-it contract. So if the Pittsburgh Steelers weren't willing to pay Najee Harris that much for his 5th-year contract, he's probably gone. And the Steelers, they're going to want Nick Chubb on a lower contract. He is 29 years old, but he has 4 Pro Bowls. He has a second-team All-Pro under his belt. So he is a player the Pittsburgh Steelers would want, and he is that kind of power back that the Steelers would get with him, just like kind of Najee Harris was. And Nick Chubb, in my eyes, if he can return to being himself, he could be one of the best running backs in the league. And like I said, he's coming off of a knee injury. He may never be the same player, but if he does, usually that second year is when the player starts returning to being themselves and feeling more comfortable. And especially when you're returning halfway through the season, like Nick Chubb did, you're not even getting the full training camp, the full practice sessions with the team. So you could wonder and you could see why he probably wasn't the same player. But if he goes to a whole training camp healthy, then he could become the player that he once was. So I believe they should take the risk on him. Also, another reason for a potential union in this level is because of the respect level that Mike Tomlin has for Nick Chubb. Tomlin has had to become very familiar with Chubb, having to game plan against him and the Cleveland Browns twice a year. And we've seen many times where Nick Chubb would destroy the Steelers on the run game. So the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin specifically has spoken about his high level of respect for Nick Chubb many times. If you remember, basically every single interview Tomlin does about the Cleveland Browns, whenever he mentions Nick Chubb, he says Mr. Chubb. So it's something to consider and something to basically look at and be like, hey, there's a level of respect there where Mike Tomlin really respects what Nick Chubb does. Calling someone Mr. Chubb and calling them Mr. in front of their name, it just shows a level of respect. So obviously Mike Tomlin, he knows this and he may bring him in because of what he's seen on tape whenever he has to study and prepare for the Cleveland Browns. And also looking at past players, the Pittsburgh Steelers have brought in many past players who've played for the Ravens, who've played for the Cincinnati Bengals, the Browns in the past, based off the respect level and what he has seen in their rivalry. So, Larry Ogunjobi's one of them. Deshaun Elliott is one recently. The Pittsburgh Steelers add players from other teams in their rivalry because they know the competitive edge that they bring. And Nick Chubb would be no different in this case scenario. And I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers should actually be interested and are actually interested. And per reports, they are. And the thing about his addition potentially being with the Steelers, you look at what Najee Harris did, and he didn't have to play every single snap. Najee Harris didn't have to play basically 60% of the time because Jalen Warren is going to get his time, he's going to get his touches. So even if Nick Chubb is still going to get back to the player he once was, he's still going to need some time off because you don't want to wear him down because of his knee injury. He's getting him back into play regularly and get the rhythm going. So he wouldn't even have to play as much because he would bring back Jalen Warren on that tender contract. And I keep mentioning the tender contract. What is a tender? Well, they placed like a first round tender, meaning if another team decided to sign Jalen Warren to a contract and beat out the Steelers in negotiations, then they would have to pay a first round draft pick to the Steelers in return. So that's basically what a tender contract is. They set a tender on him, and basically if a team decides to sign him, then they would have to give them that draft pick. And a team is not going to give up a first round draft pick for Jalen Warren or a second round draft pick, so you don't have to worry about that, meaning that he will be back on the team on like a $3 million contract. So he's going to get his touches, he's going to get his time because he is a great running back, Jalen Warren is. So Nick Chubb would come in here and just get back into play slowly and earn his way back and kind of play his way back into game shape and game speed and build up the knee and do the things that he used to do. And he won't have to do it every single time, so he's going to be more fresh and come in and be able to do the things that he once did. So this is a really good kind of thought process of potentially adding Nick Chubb, and I really like the idea because you're taking a risk on someone, but even if that risk doesn't pan out, at least you tried. And he once was one of the best running backs in the league, so you're taking a risk on that guy. It's just like when the Steelers had Najee Harris last year and Derrick Henry was set to become a free agent. And you could look at Derrick Henry. He once was the best running back in the league. And the Ravens took the risk on him and signed him. And he is still now the second or first best running back in the league in terms of rushing the ball, purely rushing. So taking the risk on Nick Chubb can only help this team. And even if it doesn't pan out, at least you still have Jalen Warren. And you know what he can do. And he could play some starter minutes as well. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, this thought process of potentially adding Nick Chubb, it's a great one. And in my eyes, Najee Harris, he was not a great running back and a failed first round draft pick. And based off his kind of seasons of 1,000 yards rushing, yes, you can say that no other running back is doing that right now. But 1,000 yards is only 1,000 yards. You're playing 17 games. That's like an average of like just over 50 yards per game. And that's not as great, especially if you're just playing every single game. If you're missing time and you're doing that in like 13 games, 12 games, sure. But he's doing that being healthy. And that's one thing to say as well. At least he was healthy. So the Steelers are going to miss Najee Harris, but at the same time, they're not going to miss him. Especially for what he probably is going to earn in free agency. And the Steelers could do better at running back. And hopefully they learn from their mistakes. And they look out in free agency and actually target the big name fish. So Nick Chubb, he is a big name fish. And let's see if the Steelers have interest, which they probably do per reports. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on this potential addition of Nick Chubb. Do you want the Steelers to look at him in free agency or do you not? Also, you have to take into consideration that the Browns are probably going to have the first dibs on Nick Chubb, But Nick Chubb has come out and said that right now he's not even had any contract talks with the Cleveland Browns. So that's a bit interesting there. So would you want him? Would you not want him? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports, everything surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. I cover it. So make sure you stay tuned to this channel for this whole off-season coverage, just like I covered the whole regular season. Free agency is about to start. The draft is going to start shortly. So stay tuned, turn notifications, like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.